The Phoenix Suns, they fired head coach Frank Vogel on Thursday. The Suns were swept, right, in the first round by the Timberwolves this postseason. The next head coach of the Suns, it'll be their third in as many seasons. Remember, Vogel was in year one of his 5-year contract. So for more on this, never fear, our Adrian Wojnarowski is here. And Woj, you reported yesterday that they were zeroing in very quickly on Mike Budenholzer as their next head coach. Where does that stand now?
Yeah, the talks between Phoenix, Mike Budenholzer, are progressing. Both sides expect that they'll get a deal done. They're not quite there yet, but Mike Budenholzer, barring any last-minute snags, will be the next head coach of the Phoenix Suns, and they're kind of where they were last year. We want a coach with championship pedigree. They hired Frank Vogel to a 5-year deal. He's out after 1 year. They'll hire another coach here who has a championship, but a longer track record of success. Mike Budenholzer won nearly 70% of his games in 5 years with the Bucks.
Yeah.
Reshaped an Atlanta franchise where he was also coach of the year. Tactically, he is one of the elite coaches in the NBA. He's a native of Arizona. And now this is an organization, the clock is ticking on this Phoenix organization to find a way to maximize these three all-NBA, all-star level players that they have and figure out if there's a way that they can build out the roster depth that they have been without. I think Mike Budenholzer is their guy. He's already talking with coaches about his potential staff. And, the expectation is, he'll be with the Phoenix front office when they head to the Combine in Chicago here in the next few days.
Okay. Well, I covered Mike Budenholzer, right, when he was working with the Milwaukee Bucks, and he is as impressive as they come. But when I look at Phoenix, it seems like they have so many issues beyond just who is their head coach. Does Mike Budenholzer, as great as he is, come in and solve their biggest problems?
No. Red Auerbach wouldn't solve their biggest problems. Phil Jackson wouldn't solve their biggest problems. Pat Riley wouldn't solve their biggest problems. No. Their roster is flawed. Fatally flawed. They don't have the pieces on. This is what happened all year. People want to sit around, and I spent a chunk of my life in Arizona, and people want to blame one of these guys or two or the three. No. They don't have a person to run and organize that team in the moments that matter most in games. Fourth quarter and crunch time. Don't have it. Not on the roster. Budenholzer, now, if he comes in and they make a substantive change, I'm not talking about subtle changes. I'm not talking about end of the bench or even depth. I'm talking about primary roster alteration. Can they do that? How do they do it? They have to trade one of those guys, and I know which one I have in mind.
I do too.
To alter what is going on with the Suns. And it's not going to be just bringing a new head coach in, as terrific as Woj outlined he is. We know every word of that's true. It is. You covered him. You know how good he is.
Excellent.
No, this is a players' league. You have to have somebody on that team who's going to run it and organize it at the times that matter most in the game. They don't have that.
Here's a question I would ask you, Perk. When you have Kevin Durant at the center of your team, do you have to have an alpha with him? Do you have to have a personality that is going to take charge in that environment? Because that's not what KD necessarily does, right?
Yes, and that's what we've been preaching, and I've been preaching all season long for Kevin Durant to get uncomfortable as a leader, right? And so the truth is that big threes are over with. Like it's a dynamic, it's a duo, it's a dynamic duo, and then you fill in the blanks from there. When it comes to big threes, especially these guys, they don't fit, right? How many times we seen on tape where Kevin Durant was standing in the corner, bad body language because he wasn't involved with the offense? Or we seen Bradley Beal standing in the corner, bad body language because he wasn't involved with the offense. They haven't had a leader since Chris Paul left because KD didn't want him there because he was going to hold Kevin Durant accountable on the professionalism side. I'm not going to even go into details. But on top of that, I just don't know if you're ever going to change Devin Booker or do you want to change him. He's a scorer, right? He has shown signs of improvement for us being a guy that could get others involved, but that's not what he do. He get buckets.
Amen. Bradley Beal was at his best when he was playing with John Wall on the ball, when they actually had a little bit of playoff success. They didn't have that much. And what is Kevin Durant's greatest seasons in his life? He was playing with Russell Westbrook on the ball, and then, of course, Steph Curry on it. So that's not what Kevin Durant does. So you have three guys you're asking to do something that's not what they became great doing.
Perk said something about big threes are dead in the NBA, especially if you have to trade all your assets to get two of those three players. Look at the other teams where you have a great core of three: Boston, Minnesota, Denver. Now, Milwaukee or Minnesota traded for one. Boston has traded, but they drafted those players. They developed them,
right,
and they didn't have to trade all their assets to acquire them. Phoenix traded so many assets to acquire Beal and Kevin Durant that it makes it impossible to have any left to go out and improve the rest of your roster. You're just stuck with minimum contract deals, and it is hard to go out and find the quality you need there to match the depth that those other teams in the West we're talking about are doing. Oklahoma City, they're developing it. They have max level. They're going to have max level players. They traded for one of them, SGA.
Both of you guys alluded to the fact that you would make a big trade, that you would look to create those assets by moving on from one of those key players. Is that something that the Phoenix Suns are allergic to the idea of doing?
I think Phoenix's idea is to try to go another year with this group, with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. Bradley Beal still holds a no-trade clause.
Good point.
I don't know. His value wasn't great last year with his contract.
Damn sure not great now.
This season didn't improve that. No. I wouldn't rule that out between now and July. We know crazy things can happen. People have conversations. It can change. But I think the idea is bringing Mike Budenholzer in to try to make another run with this group.
And I like Bud. That's my last thing. I love him.
Yeah.
I think he's a hell of a coach.
Absolutely. There's just a lot
He
going
overcome
on
all this going
in Phoenix. That's the point of this. There's also another team, right, who's searching for their next head coach right here in Los Angeles, the Lakers. Woj, where does LA stand with that?
I think this Laker search will start to heat up this coming week. Rob Pelinka will be in Chicago at the NBA Draft Combine. I think that's where they'll start asking permission, perhaps talking to some candidates. I think there's really three buckets for this Laker job. There are guys who are assistant coaches, former head coaches who might be assistants somewhere else, like a James Borrego in New Orleans, who had a really good season with their offense, and you saw what he did for them in Charlotte, where they got better each year. Candidates like that, and then sort of the unorthodox candidates, guys who haven't coached, potentially a J.J. Redick. I think that is somebody that there's interest in from the L.A. side. There's been interest in J.J. in a front office role, in a coaching role. He's a smart guy. He's a talented guy. And so there's not a straight line candidate for this Lakers job. You look at the coaching market, and with Mike Budenholzer off the board, there's no obvious veteran. He's won big. We just plug him into our organization. And I think you're going to have to look at a search for the Lakers a little differently, just because either these guys are employed or there's just not that. It is not a buyer's market right now in the coaching profession.
I'm going to say this again, like I said yesterday. While the Lakers are looking for a head coach, their main focus needs to be a coach that's going to come in to make sure they get the best out of Anthony Davis. This is not a LeBron James hire. This is an Anthony Davis hire.
And Anthony Davis, I think, is going to have more of a voice in this. I think he's very interested in what this is going to look like. I think he's really taking a look at candidates, who's out there. That doesn't mean the players are hiring the coach.
Right.
But I think Anthony Davis knows he's probably going to play for this next coach longer than LeBron James is, right, if he's going to stay with the Lakers. And so I do think AD is probably more of a part of this. But you look back at the last couple hires with the Lakers, those weren't player-led hires. Frank Vogel, Darvin Ham, the organization hired those coaches.
So we're talking about threading the needle, right? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, so the Lakers think that while you see Minnesota coming at you like an on-rushing freight train, and right behind them, or maybe even with them, is Oklahoma City, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And you have, I mean, Denver's not going to go totally away. They're going to retool or do whatever they can do to get back on championship track if they are dethroned. Really? So the Lakers are going to thread a needle and come up with a coach in a way that the organization has been unable to, has failed to in the last 2 times, even though one of those guys won a championship and the other one got into the conference finals, and that wasn't good enough. So let's thread that needle again and get it better this time.
We're talking about one of the most historical franchises in sports going to thread the needle.
Wanna try to boast at what I look like. Think I'm gonna try to wear, I pull up long range. Jimmy with the heat, I'm on fire. It's NBA on the ESPN club.